The principle of emotional authenticity and heartfelt influence, the Trust Axiom. The foundational, irreducible truth derived from this conglomerate of leadership literature is the principle of emotional authenticity, which asserts that in the Yale, modern conceptual age economy, the effectiveness and duration of executive influence are directly proportional to the leader's demonstrated emotional sincerity. This principle is not a soft skill recommendation. It is the trust axiom, the necessary precondition for all forms of high-performance culture, strategic agility, and sustainable employee engagement. The collapse of the authoritarian command. Structure. The synthesis begins with the fundamental collapse of the 20th century transactional authority model, TAM, often called command and control. The texts collectively prove that TAM, which relied on institutional hierarchy, withholding information, and the threat of extrinsic rewards, fear and compensation as critiqued by the Pinkian paradigm, is obsolete. The reasons for its failure are irreducible. Information decentralization. Knowledge is no longer siloed at the top. The specialized information necessary for problem-solving resides across the entire organization. Therefore, the old system's rationale, that the leader knows best, is invalidated. Intrinsic motivation demand, creative, conceptual, and relational, work, the primary source of 21st century value, cannot be coerced. It requires intrinsic motivation, purpose, autonomy, mastery, which is suffocated by fear and transactional leadership. Transparency. Mandate. Digital communication and generational shifts demand authenticity. Any perceived manipulation or insincerity is instantaneously detected and destroys organizational confidence. The core component, strategic vulnerability and sincerity. The heartfelt leadership model emerges as the necessary replacement for the TAM, establishing emotional authenticity as the new source of power. This is defined by a triad of behavioral commitments: sincerity, compassion, and vulnerability. Sincerity, the alignment of word and deed. The leader's expressed values must align perfectly with their daily decisions and organizational resource allocation. This creates reliability and predictability, which is the baseline of safety. Vulnerability, the admission of imperfection. The leader's willingness to admit error, express doubt, or share personal challenge is not a weakness. It is a strategic act of competence. It collapses the hierarchical distance, making the leader relatable and, crucially, making it safe for subordinates to admit their own errors, the necessary prerequisite for learning and iterative improvement. Compassion. The relational buffer. Compassion is the consistent, non-judgmental acknowledgement of the humanity of employees. It provides a psychological buffer against failure and stress. This is particularly vital in the context of the challenges detailed in Women on Top and Strong Suit, where the absence of compassionate sponsorship and mentorship often creates an unnecessarily hostile or unforgiving environment, especially for leaders operating outside the established male prototype. Heartfelt leadership demands the leader use their position to reduce the psychological load on their team, not increase it. The trust axiom and psychological safety. The synthesis conclusively proves that the goal of emotional authenticity is the cultivation of trust, which produces the only sustainable engine of high performance. Psychological safety. Trust as currency. Trust is the organization's most valuable non-monetary currency. It lowers transaction costs, accelerates decision-making by eliminating the need for constant second-guessing or politicking, and allows for the necessary sharing of crucial but sensitive information, such as admitting failure, which is impossible, without safety. Psychological safety, the irreducible enabler. This is the belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, concerns, questions, or mistakes. The texts show that without a high degree of psychological safety, a best place to work culture, the wow factor workplace, cannot exist, regardless of perks or pay. The link to women in leadership is critical here. Female leaders are often penalized for being too communal or too vulnerable, yet the synthesis argues that these very relational competencies are what create psychological safety and superior team performance. The Heartfelt model reclaims these relational strengths as essential, non-negotiable executive skills. The principle of emotional authenticity thus provides the moral and psychological foundation for the next principle, the design of an organizational system that can capitalize on this profound level of trust and psychological safety. The principle of human-centric systems design, the WOW culture. Mandate, having established the indispensable psychological foundation of trust. Principle 1. The second irreducible truth defines how this trust must be translated into organizational structure and process. This is the principle of human-centric systems design, which mandates that the highest performing culture is not managed or controlled, but intentionally curated to foster intrinsic motivation, a concept central to the philosophy of the WOW factor. Workplace. The redefinition of culture. As a strategic output, the synthesis rejects the traditional view of culture as a soft byproduct, e.g., free food and ping-pong tables. Instead, culture is defined as the strategic, measurable output of consistent leadership behavior and organizational policy that prioritizes human well-being and potential. The WOW factor workplace is merely the observable result when a system is designed according to the precepts of intrinsic drive. The 4 pillars of WOW factor systems design. The texts converge on 4 non-negotiable pillars required to translate heartfelt influence into a high-performance system. Radical transparency and information equity, the trust mechanism. The system must be designed to share information, particularly financial, strategic, and decision-making data, across all levels of the organization. This is a structural expression of sincerity. Principle 1. Transparency ensures that employees feel respected enough to see the why behind the what, transforming compliance into understanding and obedience into ownership. This systemic openness naturally dismantles the old boys club information silos that have historically disadvantaged marginalized groups, women on top. High engagement feedback loops, the mastery mechanism. The performance system must prioritize constant low-stakes, forward-looking coaching over annual, high-stakes, backward-looking appraisal. The system must encourage micro-learning loops by integrating feedback into the daily workflow. This directly supports the human need for mastery, as defined in the Pinkian paradigm, making improvement an intrinsic reward rather than an extrinsic condition tied to a raise. Furthermore, the synthesis reveals that this system is critical for women in leadership who often receive vague feedback, e.g., be more assertive, lacking actionable data. A continuous, data-rich feedback system corrects this bias. Purpose-driven talent calibration, the meaning mechanism. The culture must constantly articulate the meaning of the organization's work, connecting daily tasks to a transcendent mission that serves a greater good. This provides the context necessary for all intrinsic drive. The system's design mandates that all talent practices, hiring, promotion, resource allocation, are calibrated against this purpose. This ensures the organization is not promoting for historical compliance, fitting the old mold, but for purposeful competence, who can best execute the mission, which is essential for breaking the ceiling encountered by women who embody non-traditional strengths. Destigmatization of failure, the vulnerability mechanism. The system must institutionalize the idea that mistakes are merely data points, not moral failings. This is the structural expression of vulnerability. Principle 1. By creating a process for post-mortem analysis that focuses on systemic factors and learning, not individual blame, the system rewards risk-taking and innovation. This directly reduces the executive burden and fear of public failure that disproportionately affects women in leadership, who often operate with a smaller margin for error than their male counterparts. Culture as an ecosystem of opportunity. The ultimate synthesis of the WOW factor is that the human-centric systems design operates as an ecosystem of opportunity. By making the system transparent, Purpose-driven and intrinsically motivating, the organization creates conditions where diverse talent is naturally retained, promoted, and supported. The wow factor is therefore the competitive advantage realized by maximizing human capital in a manner that the obsolete TAM could not. It is the necessary bridge between the heartfelt leader's values and the achievement of executive success by all talented individuals, regardless of their background or preferred style. The principle of asymmetric leadership strengths and systemic agility, the gendered competence synthesis, the final unifying truth, derived through the analysis of executive success in texts like Women on Top and Strong Suit, and validated by the requirements of the heartfelt and wow factor cultures, is the principle of asymmetric leadership strengths. This axiom asserts that maximum organizational performance, particularly in environments defined by complexity and rapid change, is achieved only when the system actively recognizes, values, and promotes complementary and diverse leadership competence profiles, especially those traditionally marginalized. The irreducible flaw. The monolithic leader. Prototype. The synthesis begins by identifying the monolithic leader fallacy, the false belief that effective leadership follows a single, traditionally, male, aggressive, and highly assertive prototype. The women-focused texts reveal that success in executive roles often requires leaders to employ a bimodal approach, mastering the expected prototype, strategic vision, assertiveness, while simultaneously deploying what the system perceives as asymmetric strengths, strengths that deviate from the norm but are exponentially valuable in a heartfelt, wow factor environment. The three asymmetric strengths of modern leadership. The analysis of successful women on top reveals that their repeatable success rests on three core competencies that are often undervalued in traditional leadership assessments, but are mandatory for the new system: relational competence and network depth. This is the executive ability to build wide, deep, and resilient professional relationships based on genuine emotional exchange. Principle 1. This is more than networking. It is creating a web of support, sponsorship, and shared accountability. This capacity is vital for systemic agility, as it allows the leader to mobilize diverse resources and information across silos instantly, something TAM leaders struggled with due to their reliance on formal authority. The capacity for relational leadership is the fuel for heartfelt leadership. Inclusive decision-making, the synthesis engine. Executive effectiveness is defined by the quality of decisions. The asymmetric strength here is the capacity for inclusive, consensus-building decision architectures. Leaders exhibiting this strength deliberately solicit diverse viewpoints, manage conflict not as a fight, but as an information source, and champion ideas based on merit rather than source or rank. This ensures that the organization benefits from the full cognitive potential created by the psychological safety of the wow factor culture. The outcome is decisions that are inherently more robust and less susceptible to the groupthink fostered by monolithic leadership. Long-term systemic stewardship, the purpose anchor. The synthesis finds that many successful non-prototypical leaders prioritize long-term systemic health over short-term transactional wins. This strength is expressed through a deeper commitment to organizational purpose, Principle 2, risk mitigation through foresight, and a focus on succession planning and pipeline development. This focus on stewardship validates the core need for lasting legacy and ethical consistency, providing the ultimate purpose anchor for the entire organization. The synthesis of systemic agility, the principle of asymmetric leadership strengths, leads to the ultimate conclusion. Systemic agility. An organization led by a monolithic prototype is strong in only one environment: stability, growth, and brittle in complexity, crisis, change. An organization led by an ecosystem of asymmetric strengths, where the assertive leader is balanced by the relational leader and the short-term visionary is balanced by the long-term steward, achieves true resilience. The purpose of Women on Top and Strong Suit is not just to advocate for female executives. It is to provide the empirical data demonstrating that these other ways of leading are, in fact, essential components of the complete 21st century leadership profile. The system itself must become agile enough to recognize that leadership comes in many effective styles, The leader of the future is defined not by a single dominating strong suit, but by the organizational wisdom to create a team whose collective suits are strong and diverse enough to handle every possible scenario the complex, global environment can throw at it. The ultimate act of heartfelt leadership is the courageous institutionalization of this systemic agility.